There are moments when we realize that heroism does not always wear a uniform, when we discover that the people supporting those who serve make sacrifices that go unseen and unrecognized, and when we understand that some forms of strength and dedication are so profound they challenge our understanding of what one person can endure for love. Sometimes the hardest battles are not fought with weapons but with quiet determination. Sometimes the greatest acts of courage happen not on battlefields but in living rooms and hospitals and late night hours when someone chooses to keep giving even when they have nothing left to give. These are the stories that remind us that behind every service member is a family that serves alongside them, that military spouses carry burdens most civilians cannot imagine, and that love can drive people to feats of endurance and sacrifice that seem impossible until we witness them firsthand. If you believe in honoring the invisible army of military spouses who hold families together during deployments, who sacrifice their own dreams and health and well-being so their partners can serve, and who demonstrate daily that heroism takes many forms, hit that like button and subscribe for stories that shine light on the unsung heroes who support those in uniform and who deserve recognition for their own form of service. Staff Sergeant Brandon Mitchell, United States Army, walked onto the Family Feud stage during Veterans Week alongside his wife Ashley, their 3 children ages 12, 9, and 6, and Brandon's mother Linda, who had been instrumental in helping the family survive the past several years. Brandon was 34 years old with the bearing of someone who had seen combat, and careful observers would notice he moved with slight stiffness in his left side, suggesting old injuries not entirely healed. Ashley, 32 years old, stood next to her husband looking composed and supportive, her hand resting lightly on their youngest child's shoulder. She had the kind of tired eyes that suggested someone who had not slept properly in years, combined with a smile that seemed determined to project strength regardless of what she might be feeling internally. Steve Harvey greeted the Mitchell family with warmth, immediately engaging with the children and complimenting Ashley on keeping 3 kids organized enough to appear on television. Steve turned to Brandon with the respect he always showed military personnel during Veterans Week. "Sergeant Mitchell, thank you for your service. Tell us about your time in the Army." Brandon's response was brief and professional, explaining that he had served for 12 years, including 3 deployments to Afghanistan, that he worked in explosive ordnance disposal, which meant he dealt with improvised explosive devices and other ordnance threats, and that he had been injured during his 3rd deployment and was currently in the medical retirement process. Steve winced sympathetically at the mention of bomb disposal work. "Man, that is one of the most dangerous jobs in the military. You have my utmost respect, Sergeant. How long were your deployments?" Brandon calculated quickly. "My first was 12 months, my second was 15 months, and my third was cut short at 7 months when I was injured. So that is 34 months total, almost 3 years away from my family over a 6-year period." Steve turned to Ashley and Mrs. Mitchell. "That means you were holding down the fort at home alone for almost 3 years while your husband was in war zones. That must have been incredibly difficult." Ashley's smile remained in place, but something flickered in her eyes. "It was challenging, but you do what you need to do for your family. Military spouses learn to be resilient." Steve nodded, about to transition into starting the game when Brandon spoke up unprompted. "Mr. Harvey, before we start playing, I need to say something about my wife. I need America to hear what she did while I was deployed, because she is the real hero in our family and nobody knows the full story except our immediate family." Steve's expression shifted from game show host to genuine interest. He recognized the tone in Brandon's voice, the same tone that preceded the profound revelations that had characterized so many Veterans Week episodes. "Of course, Sergeant. What do you want to tell us about your wife?" Brandon took Ashley's hand, and she looked at him with an expression that suggested she had not expected this moment, that she was not prepared for whatever her husband was about to share. "Ashley held our family together during my deployments in ways that I did not fully understand until I came home from my last deployment. When I was overseas, she sent me emails and care packages, and she told me everything was fine at home, that the kids were doing well, that she was managing everything. She never complained. She never told me she needed help. She always said we were all doing great and I should not worry about home. I should just focus on my mission and come back safely. Steve nodded, recognizing the pattern of military spouses trying to protect deployed service members from worrying about family issues. That sounds like a devoted military wife trying to keep you focused on staying alive. Brandon's voice became more intense. What I did not know until months after I returned home, what Ashley never told me during my deployments, was that she was working 3 jobs to support our family. My military salary covered our basic expenses, but barely, and Ashley wanted to make sure our kids did not feel like they were missing out on things just because their dad was deployed. So she worked as a night shift nurse 3 nights a week, she cleaned houses 2 days a week, and she did medical transcription from home whenever she had spare hours. She was sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, raising 3 young children alone, and working herself to exhaustion. And she never said one word about it in her emails or phone calls to me. Steve's expression showed shock and concern. 3 jobs while raising 3 kids alone. How is that even possible? That is superhuman, Mrs. Mitchell. Ashley looked uncomfortable with the attention. I did what needed to be done. Our kids needed things. I wanted them to have normal childhoods even with their dad deployed. The overtime made that possible. Brandon shook his head. But that is not even the most incredible part, Mr. Harvey. What I also did not know was that Ashley was not just working 3 jobs to take care of our family. She was sending care packages to every single soldier in my unit, not just me. I would get packages from home with cookies and essentials and letters, and I thought she was just taking care of me. But then my soldiers started thanking me for the packages my wife was sending them. Guys who had nobody writing them, guys whose own families were not supportive, they were all getting packages from Ashley. She was spending hundreds of dollars a month and countless hours sending care packages to 30 soldiers she had never met because she knew they needed support from home. The studio audience made sounds of amazement and appreciation. Steve looked at Ashley with growing respect. Mrs. Mitchell, you were working 3 jobs, raising 3 kids alone, and sending care packages to an entire military unit. How did you even have time to breathe? Ashley's composure began to crack slightly. I made time. Those soldiers were keeping my husband alive. The least I could do was let them know someone at home cared about them. But Steve, I promise you that is not why Brandon wanted to talk about this. There is more to this story, and he is about to tell you the part I really did not want to become public. Brandon squeezed his wife's hand and continued. During my 3rd deployment, about 5 months in, I was injured when an IED detonated while my team was attempting to render it safe. I took shrapnel to my left side, broke several ribs, collapsed a lung, and sustained a traumatic brain injury from the blast. I was evacuated to Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany for emergency surgeries and treatment. The audience listened with complete attention, many people already tearing up in anticipation of where this story was going. Ashley got the notification that I had been seriously injured, and within 18 hours she was on a flight to Germany to be with me. Mr. Harvey, do you understand what that means? She left our 3 children. Our youngest was only 3 years old at the time. She arranged care for them with my mother, and she flew across the world to be at my bedside in a military hospital in a foreign country. She stayed with me in Germany for 3 weeks while I had 2 additional surgeries and began recovery. She slept in hospital chairs. She advocated with my doctors. She was there when I woke up confused from sedation. She kept me calm when I was panicking from the brain injury. She did everything a spouse is supposed to do in that situation. But what I did not know, what she did not tell me until months after I came home, was what she sacrificed to be there. Steve leaned forward, completely absorbed in the story. What did she sacrifice, Sergeant? Brandon's voice broke with emotion. Ashley was sick when she got on that plane to Germany. She had been experiencing symptoms for weeks before my injury, symptoms that suggested something was seriously wrong. She had ignored them because she was too busy working 3 jobs and raising our kids and sending care packages. She had finally made a doctor's appointment for the day after she got the call about my injury. She canceled that appointment, got on a plane, and spent 3 weeks at my bedside while she was sick and in pain and not getting the medical attention she needed. She put her own health completely aside to take care of me. The studio went completely silent. Steve Harvey stood motionless, his expression showing dawning horror at what he was hearing. What was wrong with her? What was she sick with? Ashley spoke quietly. I had cervical cancer, Mr. Harvey. Stage 3 when it was finally diagnosed 2 months after I got back from Germany. The delay in diagnosis because I prioritized taking care of Brandon meant the cancer had time to progress and spread. Steve Harvey lost all composure, his face showing shock and anguish. You had cancer and you got on a plane to Germany instead of going to your doctor. You let your cancer go untreated for months while taking care of your injured husband. Ashley nodded, tears now flowing freely. He needed me. He was badly injured and confused and scared. I could not let him go through that alone. My appointment could wait. Except it could not wait, not really, but I did not know that at the time. I thought I was just having some health issues that could be addressed later. I did not know it was cancer, and I did not know that every day of delay was giving it more time to spread. Steve Harvey sat down heavily on the edge of the stage, his face in his hands, visibly trying to process what he was hearing. Brandon continued the story. When Ashley finally went to her doctor 2 months after we returned from Germany, 2 months after she had spent 3 weeks caring for me in a foreign hospital while she was sick, the diagnosis was stage 3 cervical cancer that had spread to nearby tissues. She needed immediate aggressive treatment, including surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation, and through all of that treatment, through surgery and 25 radiation sessions and multiple rounds of chemotherapy that made her violently ill, she never complained. She continued taking care of me as I recovered from my injuries. She continued taking care of our 3 children, and she continued being the strongest person I have ever known. She lost her hair, she lost weight, she was exhausted and in pain, and she still showed up every day for our family. Steve looked at Ashley with an expression of profound respect mixed with distress. Mrs. Mitchell, how are you now? What is your health status? Ashley smiled, a genuine smile this time. I have been cancer-free for 2.5 years. The treatment was successful. I am still dealing with some long-term effects from the radiation and chemotherapy, and I will need regular monitoring for the rest of my life. But I am here. I am alive. I am with my family. That is what matters. Steve shook his head slowly. You put your husband and your children and 30 soldiers you never met ahead of your own life. You worked yourself to exhaustion. You delayed cancer treatment. You gave everything you had and more. Why would you sacrifice yourself like that? Ashley's response was simple and direct. Because that is what love means, Mr. Harvey. Love means you do what needs to be done even when it costs you something. My husband was in danger every single day of his deployments. He was putting his life on the line for our country. The least I could do was make sure he and his soldiers knew they were supported at home. And when he was injured, the least I could do was be there with him. Yes, it turned out that decision had consequences I did not anticipate, but I would make the same choice again. I would always choose to be there for him when he needs me. Steve stood and walked over to Ashley, pulling her into a tight embrace while she cried on his shoulder. The audience was sobbing openly. The camera operators were wiping their eyes, and Brandon stood with his arms around his children who were all crying because they had never heard the complete story of what their mother had endured. When Steve composed himself enough to speak, he addressed the cameras directly. Ladies and gentlemen, we talk about military service and we honor the men and women who wear the uniform. We should. They deserve our respect and gratitude. But we do not talk enough about military spouses. We do not recognize the people who hold families together during deployments, who raise children alone, who manage every crisis that arises when their partner is overseas. And we especially do not recognize the people like Ashley Mitchell, who sacrifice themselves completely, who work 3 jobs while taking care of 3 kids, who send care packages to soldiers they have never met, who fly around the world to care for their injured spouse, even when they themselves are sick, who delay their own critical medical care to be there for their family. Ashley Mitchell is a hero. She does not wear a uniform, but she has served this country by supporting her husband's service in ways that almost cost her life." Steve's voice grew stronger and more passionate. "This woman worked herself to exhaustion for years. She ignored her own health to take care of everyone else. She put her husband, her children, and 30 soldiers ahead of herself in every single decision. She got on a plane when she should have been in a doctor's office, and that decision could have killed her. But she survived. She beat cancer. She is standing here today as a testament to the strength and sacrifice of military spouses who give everything they have, and then find more to give." Steve turned back to Ashley and Brandon. "I am going to do something right now. We are not going to play Family Feud today. I do not care about the game. What I care about is making sure Ashley Mitchell gets the recognition she deserves and the support she needs." Steve pulled out his phone and made several calls right there on stage while the audience waited. He spoke to his foundation staff, to his production team, to contacts he had in various organizations. After 10 minutes of calls, he addressed the Mitchell family. "Here is what is going to happen. First, my foundation is going to pay off every medical bill Ashley accumulated from her cancer treatment. Every single bill, from the surgeries, the chemotherapy, the radiation, all of it. You are not paying another dollar for the treatment that saved your life." The audience erupted in applause, but Steve held up his hand. "Second, my foundation is going to provide college scholarships for all 3 of your children, full scholarships to any school they can get into. Your sacrifice for your family and for those soldiers should not mean your children have to struggle to pay for education." Steve continued. "Third, I am working with several military spouse organizations to establish the Ashley Mitchell Support Fund, which will provide financial assistance to military spouses who are facing medical crisis or financial hardship during deployments. Because Ashley's story is not unique, there are thousands of military spouses struggling right now, working multiple jobs, ignoring their own health, sacrificing themselves to keep their families afloat while their partners are deployed. We are going to help them." Ashley stood there shaking her head in disbelief, unable to speak. Brandon pulled his wife close and spoke for both of them. "Mr. Harvey, we do not know how to thank you. This is overwhelming." Steve smiled. "You do not need to thank me. You have already given more than anyone should have to give. This is us finally giving something back to you." The episode aired 6 weeks later and generated the most intense response of any Family Feud episode in the show's history. The story of Ashley Mitchell working 3 jobs, sending care packages to an entire unit, flying to Germany while unknowingly sick with cancer, and then battling that cancer while still caring for her injured husband and their children reached hundreds of millions of people. Military spouse organizations shared the episode widely, noting that Ashley's experience illustrated the often invisible sacrifices made by spouses during deployments. Medical professionals discussed the importance of not ignoring health symptoms, even when life circumstances make it difficult to seek care. Cancer advocacy groups used Ashley's story to emphasize that early detection saves lives and that delayed diagnosis can have serious consequences even for treatable cancers. The response from military families was particularly powerful. Thousands of military spouses reached out to share their own stories of working multiple jobs during deployments, of ignoring their own needs to support their families, of dealing with health crises while their partners were overseas. Many expressed that they had felt invisible in their sacrifice, that civilian communities did not understand what they endured, and that Ashley's story had finally given voice to experiences they had been unable to articulate. The conversation expanded to include systemic discussions about military pay adequacy, about why a staff sergeant's salary was insufficient to support a family without supplemental income, about the lack of support services for military spouses during deployments, and about the need for better healthcare access for military families. The Ashley Mitchell Support Fund raised over $8 million in its first year and provided assistance to over 400 military spouse families facing medical or financial crises. The fund prioritized spouses who were dealing with serious health issues, who were working multiple jobs to make ends meet, or who were caring for service members injured during deployment. Ashley herself became involved with the fund's administration, working part time reviewing applications, and connecting spouses with resources. She found that helping other military families gave purpose to her own experience of suffering, that her sacrifice could create pathways for others to get help before they reached crisis points. She spoke at military spouse events around the country, always emphasizing that she was not extraordinary but rather representative of thousands of spouses making similar sacrifices every day in obscurity. Brandon medically retired from the Army 6 months after the Family Feud episode aired, and he struggled with the transition to civilian life as many combat veterans do. He found meaningful work as a first responder trainer, teaching police and fire departments about explosive threats and response protocols. But more significantly, he became an advocate for military spouse support, speaking alongside Ashley about the need to recognize and resource the families of service members. He was candid about how he had been completely unaware during his deployments of what Ashley was enduring, how he had believed her emails saying everything was fine, how he had not recognized the signs of her exhaustion and illness when he returned home, because he was focused on his own injuries and recovery. He spoke about the guilt he carried for not protecting his wife the way she had protected him, and about his commitment to spending the rest of his life honoring her sacrifice by being the husband and father she deserved. The Mitchell children grew up understanding the full scope of what their mother had done during their father's deployments and during her illness. They learned that she had worked those 3 jobs partly so they could have birthday parties and school supplies and Christmas presents that made them feel normal even with their father deployed. They learned that the care packages their father received had been assembled late at night after they went to bed, that their mother had spent money she barely had to send comfort to soldiers she did not know. They learned that she had chosen to fly to Germany instead of going to her doctor, that she had been sick while caring for their injured father, that she had fought cancer while continuing to care for them. These lessons shaped their understanding of love, service, and sacrifice in profound ways that influenced the adults they became. 5 years after the Family Feud episode, the entire Mitchell family participated in a documentary about military spouse sacrifice and resilience. Ashley, now 37 and still cancer-free, spoke about how the public recognition of her story had been both validating and uncomfortable. She emphasized repeatedly that she had not done anything special, that thousands of military spouses were making similar choices every day without recognition or support. What I want people to understand is that military service is not just the person in uniform. It is the entire family. When Brandon deployed, our whole family deployed in a sense. We all made sacrifices. We all served. The difference is that Brandon got thanked for his service while I got asked why I looked tired. Military spouses need recognition. They need support. They need resources. And they need communities that understand what they endure. Brandon added his perspective in the documentary. The military trains service members extensively on how to survive combat, how to complete missions, how to handle stress and danger. But nobody prepares you for what your family is going through while you are deployed. Nobody tells you that your spouse might be working 3 jobs or dealing with a health crisis or barely holding on emotionally. The military needs to do better supporting families, and communities need to do better recognizing that the people supporting service members are making their own sacrifices that deserve honor and appreciation. The documentary featured interviews with dozens of other military spouses sharing similar stories of sacrifice, creating a comprehensive picture of what deployment means for families and what support systems need to exist to help them survive intact. The documentary concluded with an update on the Ashley Mitchell Support Fund and the hundreds of families it had helped over 5 years. Stories were shared of spouses who received assistance with medical bills, who got financial support to avoid eviction during deployment, who accessed mental health services they could not otherwise afford, who received emergency help during family crises. Each story represented a military family that had been supported through difficult circumstances because Ashley had been willing to share her own story publicly, because she had transformed her suffering into a resource for others. The documentary ended with Ashley speaking directly to military spouses watching who might be struggling in silence. You are not alone. What you are experiencing is real and valid. Asking for help is not weakness, it is survival. Please reach out. Please tell someone what you need. Please do not ignore your health or sacrifice yourself to the point of breaking. Your family needs you alive and well. Let people help you. 10 years after that Family Feud episode, Ashley and Brandon Mitchell were invited to the White House for the signing of new legislation expanding healthcare access and financial support for military families. The legislation had been influenced by the national conversation sparked by Ashley's story and by the advocacy work that followed. It included provisions for emergency financial assistance during deployments, expanded mental health services for military spouses, and improved healthcare coordination to prevent the kind of delayed diagnosis Ashley had experienced. As Ashley stood in the Rose Garden watching the president sign the bill into law, she thought about that day on the Family Feud stage when Brandon had unexpectedly shared her story, when she had stood there mortified that her private struggles were becoming public, when Steve Harvey had broken down crying after hearing what she had endured. She thought about the decades since then, about the thousands of military families who had been helped by the fund bearing her name, about the legislation that would make life slightly easier for families like hers, about the cultural shift in how military spouse sacrifice was recognized and valued. She thought about her own health, 10 years cancer-free now and living with the long-term effects of treatment, but alive and present with her family. She thought about Brandon, recovered from his injuries and thriving in his civilian career and his role as father and advocate. She thought about their 3 children, now adults or near adults, who had learned about service and sacrifice not from abstractions, but from lived family experience. And she thought about the moment Steve Harvey had looked at her and called her a hero, validating years of struggle she had never expected anyone to acknowledge or care about. If Ashley Mitchell's story moved you, if her willingness to work 3 jobs and delay cancer treatment to support her husband and his unit challenged your understanding of what military spouses endure, if you believe that the families who support service members deserve recognition and resources for their own sacrifices, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this story with everyone you know, because Ashley's experience is not unique and military families need visible support. Leave a comment sharing how you have supported military families in your community, or how you plan to get involved in helping military spouses who are struggling during deployments. Let us create a community that recognizes that military service is a family endeavor, that spouses and children serve alongside the uniformed member in ways that deserve honor and appreciation, and that we have an obligation to support these families not just with words, but with concrete resources and assistance. Ashley showed us that love can drive people to extraordinary sacrifice, that military spouses demonstrate their own form of heroism through daily choices to hold families together under impossible circumstances, and that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who serve without uniform or recognition or adequate support. Steve Harvey lost control that day not because he was entertaining an audience, but because he was confronting the reality of what military families endure, the sacrifices made in living rooms and hospitals and late night hours while the nation sleeps safely. His response, immediate and comprehensive, showed what becomes possible when we truly see these sacrifices and commit to honoring them appropriately. Subscribe and share to support military spouse organizations, to advocate for better military family support systems, and to ensure that no military spouse has to work 3 jobs or delay critical medical care or sacrifice themselves to breaking because our military compensation and support systems are inadequate, because somewhere right now there is another Ashley, another military spouse working themselves to exhaustion, ignoring health symptoms, holding everything together while their partner is deployed, and they need to know that help is available, that their sacrifice is seen, and that they do not have to carry everything alone. Thank you for being part of this community that honors all forms of service, that supports military families comprehensively, and that commits to ensuring that the people who support our service members receive the recognition and resources they have more than earned through their own sacrifices.